For the past 3 months, hundreds of people in Washington state have protested weekly to demand a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestine. That's despite the U.S. government and Washington state's support of Israel in their aggressive siege. Ground Zero Radio's Marian Mohamed connects with individuals and local organizations who echo the needs and strife of Palestinians, dead and alive.
On a Saturday morning in early November, chants from protesters resonated from the steps of the Capitol Legislature building in Olympia. There are hundreds of people here at the Capitol. Many are wearing the keffiyeh, a Palestinian headscarf that has long symbolized resistance. Red, white, black, and green flags rise high over the sea of people. What was supposed to be a bleak and quiet Saturday morning in Olympia instead became another opportunity for people to gather and demand an end to the siege in Gaza. The Israeli military launched a siege against Gaza in response to the October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas, a Palestinian organization that governs Gaza. That Hamas attack killed about 1,000 people. In response, the Israeli military has killed 20,000 Palestinians. 1 in every 200 Gazans have been killed, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. 85% of Gazans have been forced to evacuate their homes. In Olympia, speakers expressed their frustrations.
75 years. Across generations, Palestinians have experienced what a colonial invader does to rip apart a nation physically and emotionally.
Since the violence began in October, Israel has bombed Gaza almost daily. They've targeted hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, which is a war crime under the Geneva Convention.
If the people of Palestine have insisted on living with humanity and dignity, then we must honor the humanity of colonized people resisting wherever they are in the world.
Speakers honored the Palestinians killed in the bombings by reading out a list of thousands of their names.
Every time I say a name, I need you guys to repeat it, so people know that our martyrs are not numbers. They are people who have lives, they have families, they have loved ones. And this is really important for us to remember. عايشة خليل حمدان السطل. هبة عبد الله حسين السطل.
Protesters, many non-Arabic speakers, then repeated each name without hesitation, including the names of 133 infants.
علي محمد علي حسونة جود حسن علي حسونة منى أحمد محمد حسونة سمر رامي محمد فضل حسونة يزن محمد علي حسونة شريف أشرف حسونة وعد محمد حسين النجار محمود أحمد صالح النجار فرح نبيل حسين النجار فاطمة فراس فهمي النجار محمد فهد موسى النجار منال نظير مصطفى المصري أماني جميل حافظ المصري رمضان كمال مصطفى المصري مهيم ماهر خليل المصري ياسر كمال مصطفى المصري زينب محمد أحمد المصري محمود ميسرة محمود المصري.
Reading the names was especially meaningful because some U.S. politicians, including President Biden, have shown a shameless disregard for Palestinian life and downplayed how many people have died. Following the reading of each name was a dying demonstration. Pieces of paper with the full names of murdered Palestinians were handed out to individuals. Protesters laid out on the steps of the Capitol building with that piece of paper cradled in their hands. What's happening now in Gaza isn't the only time Israel has acted aggressively. It's been this way since 1948, when Israel began its occupation of Palestine. The way the Israeli government has treated the civilians in Gaza since October 7th is another reminder of Israel's commitment to expel Palestinians from their homeland. The march in Olympia was part of an array of organized protests and demonstrations calling the Israeli government out.
This is the time for action. This is the time for courage. This is the time for anger. This is the time for us to stop the genocide. This is the time for us to end the occupation. This is the time for us to free Palestine.
On a different Saturday, in mid-October, Seattle's Westlake Center was filled with protesters instead of shoppers. Alon Lapid, a member of Students United for Palestinian Equality and Return UW, explained the countless ways in which the basic rights of Palestinians have been trampled on.
We're here to say no to over 75 years of Palestinian oppression, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, and to specifically call out the last 16 years of siege on Gaza, demanding an immediate end to that siege.
Lapid is referring to Israel's 16-year blockade on Gaza. The blockade means Gaza is fenced in by Israel. People and goods cannot come in and out of Gaza without Israel's permission. Because of the blockade, 80% of Palestinians must rely on humanitarian assistance. In 2018, Gazans initiated a year of weekly, non-violent protests demanding an end to the blockade. The IDF responded to the protest by killing 266 individuals and injured over 30,000 Palestinians.
Well, it's because the Palestinian people as a whole are engaged in a struggle for freedom and in a fight for liberation and return to Palestine from the river to the sea. And Gaza is the cradle of Palestinians who have risen up and said no to more occupation, no to more colonization and theft of their land.
For protesters in Washington, it only felt right to make it out each weekend and march for hours. Moniba Qureshi, a protester visiting Seattle from the UK, came across the rallies taking place over social media and didn't hesitate to bring her forest green keffiyeh with her to Westlake Center.
So I'm not Palestinian myself, but I definitely did grow up in that kind of environment. Like a very big figure in my life growing up was my auntie Aisha, who she used to kind of sponsor Palestinian IDPs to come and stay with us when we were young.
Seeing people like her auntie Aisha helping internally displaced Palestinians and hearing about what Palestinians face within Gaza and the West Bank solidified her support.
Yeah, it's very, very upsetting really that there is such a wide outrage to a kind of movement of liberation. I feel if it was done by other kind of subsects of society, there may not have been this level of outrage and how they're trying to kind of conflate the struggle of the Palestinians to that of extremism or any other kind of negative aspect. This alone is colonizer versus the colonized. This alone is oppressor versus the oppressed. This is nothing to do with any other kind of agenda that I think people are trying to push, especially in the media.
Qureshi emphasized that those being affected the most by what's unfolding shouldn't be labeled just by their nationality or religion.
I feel like people should know that this is the time to stand. If we are not on the right side of history with this, how are we going to, one, live with ourselves, and two, be able to kind of push any kind of positive message in the world? If you are a person of justice, then this is your struggle. This is not like a fight for liberation that is only concerned with Palestinians or Gazans or Muslims. This is a problem for every human in the world, and people really need to understand that, I feel.
The local display of camaraderie and the acknowledgement of what the Palestinians are facing was a sight to behold for Palestinian Americans like Nadia Barghouti.
A few days of just feeling really isolated and sad. It was nice to be around people, other Palestinians, non-Palestinians, lots of Filipino people, who kind of were supporting and uplifting Palestinians rather than asking for information and stuff like that. So that was good. And then the one on Saturday was really nice. There were a lot of people, a lot of kids. And that one felt really community-based and family-oriented. And it was nice seeing, like, all different types of people. There were a lot of Jewish people there, a lot of indigenous people. And, yeah, it wasn't just Arabs and Muslims, which was good to see, too.
For the past 75 years, Israel has violently pushed Palestinians across the region into the Israeli-occupied Gaza and West Bank. Throughout her life, Barghouti has seen videos of Palestinians being forcefully pushed out of their homes, those homes being bulldozed, journalists being shot, and children being killed.
I'm not the one under occupation, so I have a duty to carry on for the Palestinians that can't leave, don't have basic human rights, are facing like more of the racism and persecution on the ground back in Palestine.
Despite everything that has been thrown at them, Palestinians know they'll return home. Barghouti shares that her dad, who immigrated from Palestine, still holds the keys to his house that once resided in occupied Palestine.
Palestinians are raised with this idea of like returning home, rooted wherever you are, like diaspora Palestinians. We have a lot of keys in our homes to symbolize returning.
In the past 60 years, as part of the Israeli occupation, more than 50,000 Palestinian homes have been demolished and replaced with homes only for Israeli citizens, according to the Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions. But Barghouti says this is the first time she's seen such a huge international and public outcry for what Gazans and all Palestinians are having to deal with at the hands of the Israeli government. At one point in her life, she was quite afraid of the ramifications of saying her nationality outright in public spaces or in simple interactions. But that doesn't hold her back.
At least for me and a lot of Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims alike, like, we're kind of like, we're not the ones, like, we come from this privileged position of being in the West, like, being unabashedly pro-Palestinian is the, like, least we can do for a people that are just begging to be seen, remembered, or helped.
Olympia and Westlake weren't the only locations where protests and demonstrations took place. On the evening of November 3rd, Seattle healthcare workers held a vigil and speaking session at Harborview Park to honor murdered Palestinian healthcare workers. The Palestinian flag draped over the metal railings and stone edges of the park as participants silently gathered on the small lawn to pay their respects. Amina, a speaker at the vigil who asked to only go by her first name, expressed her frustration at the fact that a majority of these hospitals are dealing with a limited amount of medical supplies.
I don't know about any of you, but I can't imagine going under even the most minor of surgeries without all the anesthesia in the world. And these people are having amputations, C-sections, heart surgeries, deep burns that burn down to the bone with zero, no meds, no nothing, not even a Tylenol to help them, not even water or food to give their body strength to heal. And it just keeps happening, and it just keeps getting worse. And now it's going to get worse because the hospitals are now unable to treat people. They are unable to be a shelter for people.
Amina refers to the complete blockade of any food, water, electricity, and medical supplies entering Gaza after the October 7th attack. Hospitals have been dealing with the shortage of painkillers, pharmacies having to shut down, and patients undergoing surgery without anesthesia, according to Doctors Without Borders. As individuals lit their candles in the cold, dark evening at Harborview Park, the names of doctors, dentists, nurses, paramedics, medical, and dental students were recited into the night.
Dr. Tamer Al-Khayyat, Dr. Mahmoud Al-Khayyat, Dr. Razan Al-Rakawi, Dr. Serene Al-Atar, Dr. Saeed Rabai, Dr. Mohamed Al-Samari, Dr. Rafat Abu Dawood, Dr. Amal Al-Makabma, Dr. Ibtihal Al-Astar, Dr. Dua Awad, Dr. Moad Nabahin, Dr. Youssef Jadala, Dr. Inas Youssef, Dr. Isra Al-Ashkar, Dr. Abdallah Ashur, Dr. Hammam El-Dib.
Shortly after, John Carney, a University of Washington medical student, read out a letter written by Mariam, who is a fifth-year medical student living in Gaza.
I'm a fifth-year medical student. I got into medicine because at 16, 17 years old, I was fond of the idea of Doctors Without Borders as an organization. I wanted to be a part of it because for me, it was this organization that helps people living in war zones. By the time I was 16 years old, I had survived 3 aggressions on the Gaza Strip and multiple escalations. I have witnessed firsthand the lack of resources, human resources, and specialty doctors. Recently, I've decided to pursue a career in plastic and reconstructive surgery, which is very much needed specialization right now in the Gaza Strip because of the amount of disabilities and burns, horrific burns, that we have witnessed recently. Generally, getting into medicine was mainly motivated by wanting to be of help to my people and of help to my community.
Mariam describes the horrific situations at hospitals during the night. Increased numbers of wounded individuals arriving in the ER, surgical equipment being sterilized in vinegar, and doctors using their phone's flashlight due to the fact that there's no electricity. The daily airstrikes in the past 2 months have caused a high insurgence of life-altering surgical cases for doctors who barely have the necessary resources to meet the needs of their patients.
Because when the sun sets, it's the time where everything is 100 times worse than it is during the day.
A few days after the healthcare worker demonstration in Seattle, protesters were encouraged to gather at the port of Tacoma in an effort to block a military vessel headed from Washington to Israel. For 12 hours, protesters were able to prevent workers of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union from loading weapons onto the MV Cape Orlando, a U.S. military vessel, according to Sami Dun Seattle. One dock worker even refused to do any work when witnessing the display of unity for Palestinians. The Puyallup and Nisqually water warriors used their canoes and kayaks to block the ship as protesters cheered them on. However, military workers were still able to load the vessel. A few days later, in mid-November, protesters continued to highlight and condemn Washington's allyship with Israel by by holding another rally at Boeing's Military Delivery Center in Tukwila. Organizations like Samidun Seattle, Anakbayan UW, ILPS Seattle, Resist U.S.-led War Seattle stood united in their efforts to highlight Boeing's complicity in Israel's attack on Palestinians. Speakers like Bryce, an indigenous water protector and member of the American Indian movement, talked about a moment when he worked as an electronic assembler and asked what he and his coworkers were making. Bryce would then be told that what they were assembling were war weapons. He would then leave that job. To commemorate the Palestinians who've been killed and those who still live on, Bryce performed an indigenous song. Stepping away from the mic, he began to beat at his drum and fall into a roaring chorus. According to Bloomberg, in October 2023, Boeing sped up the delivery of about 1,000 bombs from the U.S. to Israel. Daniel Feldy, a member and media liaison for Resist U.S.-led War Seattle, explains how Boeing, which is the third largest weapons producer in the world and is headquartered in Washington state, is contributing to the aid that the U.S. federal government provides Israel on an annual basis.
Right here in the Washington area, they produce the Poseidon P-8, which is a military surveillance plane that they make out of a 737, commercial airliner 737. They turn into a military surveillance plane. Same thing with the KC-46, the Pegasus tanker. It's a military refueling plane. They produce it up in Everett, Washington, and they send it down here to the delivery center to be sent off.
In September 2023, Boeing agreed to a $927 million contract with the Israeli military, according to Defense News. Our federal government already sends billions of dollars to Israel on an annual basis. In November, Biden wanted to send $14 billion more dollars, but the Senate blocked the request. But on December 9th and December 29th, Biden bypassed Congress and approved emergency weapon sales to Israel. At the Tukwila protest, demonstrators drenched their hands with red paint and jumped high to slap a handprint on the Boeing sign that stands proudly in front of the delivery center. They marked the tall sign with the saying, "Free Palestine," in red. Elsie, one of the protesters who added their handprint to the Boeing sign, heard about the protest through social media and was even at the Block the Boat demonstration in Tacoma.
I think one of the things that was so blaringly obvious of an injustice was the fact that the Israeli they push the Palestinians into a corner with everything. In Jerusalem, they don't allow building permits for homes for Palestinians to live in so that they can live in a house, have a roof over their heads. And then when they build houses without permits because they're forced to, then the Israelis come and break the homes apart and tear them down. And it's that's just insane to me.
Elsie was able to build her understanding of the occupation of Palestine by watching informative videos, reading articles, and using social media. Through social media, Palestinian journalists are able to send on-the-ground reports of Israeli violence directly to people all over the world. At the end of November, a month after the Gaza siege began, and with over 10,000 Palestinians killed, the Seattle City Council finally acted. The City Council passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire, condemning anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hate. However, the resolution doesn't denounce our federal government from providing aid to Israel or for a complete end to Israel's occupation of Palestine. As Israel continues to drop bombs, inflict wounds, trauma, and end the lives of Palestinians, hundreds of individuals within Seattle continue to march, chant, and push for a freed Palestine.
Beloved Palestine, how do I live away from your plains and mounds? The feet of mountains that are dyed with blood are calling me, and on the horizon appears the dye. The weeping shores are calling me, and my weeping echoes in the ears of time. The escaping streams are calling me. They are becoming foreign in their land. Your orphan cities are calling me, and your villages and domes. My friends ask me, will we meet again? Will we return? Yes, we will kiss the bedewed soil, and the red desires are on our lips. Tomorrow, we will return. And the generations will hear the sound of our footsteps.
From Seattle, Washington, this is Marian Mohamed, signing off from Ground Zero Radio, where we listen to be heard.